Hey folks, it's Sam, and I'm talking today about the new moon in Sagittarius, the Sagittarius cycle that that will happen early morning, December 23rd, and also the solstice that just happened. Where we just had the solstice occur on December 21st. That's in the northern hemisphere. It's the winter solstice. In the southern hemisphere, it's the summer solstice. So, for those of you who live below the equator, happy first day of summer. I hope you're enjoying the warmth. And in the northern hemisphere, it's the winter solstice. So, we're going to be talking about those things today. And again, in context of the new moon in Sagittarius as well. As you see, this is starting here in Mula Nakshatra. This will be December 23rd. We have this new moon in Sagittarius happening in the very early the very early hours here on the West Coast. So a lot of big things that are happening right now with a couple important shifts. We're also moving into the new year is ahead, and you probably have seen by now. If not, I will let you know that you can get your personal forecast where I go over the 10 most important shifts for your sign and for all signs that you can get. I just dropped a link in the live update, and you can see where we're right here at this point right now. Mercury's about to go retrograde, and that'll be retrograde into next year until January 17th. And then Saturn moves into Aquarius. So we have a big shift ahead. We're less than a month away from a huge shift, especially of Saturn moving into Aquarius. That's going to be really big. And so, again, there's actually 11 big shifts that I talked about in my free forecast. This is the free forecast that you can also register for now. You can get that at 2023vedicastrology.com. Drop the link in here again. It looked like I might have had a little glitch there with the link. But so again, these are very important shifts. This is free. This 2023vedicastrology.com is free. Again, the 10 biggest shifts, including Saturn and Aquarius for your sign, because again, we're all moving forward with this new paradigm, leaving behind the Saturn and Capricorn cycle, which can really be emblematic of COVID and all of the restriction and that feeling of being locked down and inhibited. We're moving on from that with Saturn moving into Aquarius by middle of January. So that's one of the 10 or 11 important shifts, including Venus retrograde. We have a big eclipse cycle happening in April. Jupiter moves into Aries in April. So a lot of big shifts happening. You want to hear about that just in general, you could just register for that. But then you want to know how this is going to influence you and the people in your life. So that's where you can get the 2023 forecast for you at my2023vedicastrology.com. So please check those things out. So as you can see, this Saturn is right at the edge, and by the middle of January, Saturn will be moving into Aquarius. By April, Jupiter will be moving into Aries. So where we're at right now, though, is this new moon. As you see, this sun and moon are here in early Sagittarius in Mula Nakshatra. So this winter solstice now happens at about 6 degrees of sidereal Sagittarius. Now, again, that's actually based on the sidereal zodiac. And as you can see, this diagram here, this is actually from a class that I taught on the calendar and the zodiac. And again, this calendar and the zodiac is very important for you to understand that we just had the new moon, which is when the sun and moon come together. That's based on what are called tithis or lunar days. This new moon just happened, and it happened in the sign of Sagittarius, which is down here. And there's the entire system of Western astrology bases the zodiac signs on the calendar. But again, in Vedic astrology, we base the zodiac on the sky. And you see this diagram here, this nakshatra sky-based zodiac, which is eternal and not changing, but this tropical zodiac that is used in Western astrology keeps changing. But again, the vernal equinox and the summer solstice and the winter solstice, they keep moving and processing through the zodiac. So what we're talking about now with this winter solstice is actually happening in Western astrology. It's the first day of Capricorn, even though, as you can see, based on the sky, it's Sagittarius. The constellation of Sagittarius is where the actual solstice happened, and it's where this new moon is happening as well. And so again, this is not just some wacky astrologer. Astronomers would say the same thing, that it's happening in Sagittarius. When you look at anything that's happening astronomically, of course, the astronomical sky is the sidereal star-based sky, because it's literally the constellations that haven't moved. And in Indian astronomy and cosmology and astrology, it's nakshatra-based, which means the 27 portions of sky that begin on Aries and the nakshatra of Ashwini. That's when the zodiac circle starts. So we're talking about these sun and moon cycles. And again, the sun and moon come together. See this K and this S? This means Krishna Paksha, or waning moon, and then Shukla Paksha, which is the waxing moon. So this time here, as I'm recording this on December 22nd, is this K14, this 14th lunar day of Krishna Paksha. It's right there at K14, and then it's going to move, and then boom, Amavasya is when sun and moon come together. On Amavasya, that's what we have tomorrow at about 1 a.m. on December 23rd. That's what starts the new moon cycle, and it's a new month. It's a Soli lunar month based on the Soli lunar calendar. And if you want to understand all this stuff, you can actually get a bonus class that I'm teaching in my upcoming Karma, the Moon, and Consciousness course that I'm going to be teaching January 7th and 8th. It's a great way to start the year off with really connecting to the heart and a very devotional space. And I have a couple great bonus classes. It's going to be taught with Elise de Villiers, and a couple great bonus classes. One is the Classical Moon Yogas course, and the other I just added is this class on the calendar and the zodiac, so you can understand these new moon cycles, full moon cycles, and how the Indian holidays are based on these lunar phases, and also just the real understanding of the ontology and the truth of the zodiac and the calendar, and so that you're not confused about why we're using the stellar-based sky and how that plays into these lunar phases, these new moons, these full moons, and why we measure them with the sky directly. Rather than measuring the sky based on the seasons, we measure all of the celestial movements with the sky directly. So you can get that as a bonus course when you register for this course. I'll tell you about that a little bit later. But right now, again, this new moon in Sagittarius is very much about a new cycle of hope and inspiration and purpose. And this new moon comes after this Scorpio cycle that we just went through. The Scorpio cycle started around the end of November when sun and moon came together then. And then we go through all of these lunar phases. We go through all these lunar cycles, 30 days of, it's actually 15 days of the waxing cycle, 15 days of the waning cycle. Then we come back to this again. So we had the sun and moon come together here. Then we had 15 days of waxing, 15 days of waning, and then it starts over again. So we're moving on and letting go of a lot of the potential sort of triggering and, maybe paranoia or worry and stress and fear of Scorpio, and also building upon the emotional resilience and devotion and, our emotional courage that we just developed through that Scorpio cycle. And we're taking that emotional courage, that emotional resilience, and now connecting it to something more inspiring, more inspirational. Because we don't want to hang out in that place where where we feel like we're just trying to emotionally survive and emotionally defend ourselves and protect ourselves. This is the difficulty of Scorpios. We can get in that kind of survival mode, sort of hunkered down, just trying to fight our way out of something. At least that's the way it can feel. Again, that can be very depleting. And ultimately, we learn that the only fight is against our own ignorance. And then Scorpio can become very devotional and very emotionally courageous. Sorry. But then what happens is a new cycle of hope, inspiration, and purpose emerges in the Sagittarius cycle. So that's where we're at right now. We're right on the cusp of that new cycle of inspiration, hope, and purpose. And the first part of that cycle is Mula Nakshatra, which literally means roots, and pulling out by the roots and uprooting these difficult and dark fears and emotional stresses and worries and concerns. Because again, at the heart of the Scorpio energy is this emotion and these deeply buried kind of fears and stresses and frustrations and emotion. So before we can really connect with a cycle of hope and purpose, we need to pull that out by the roots. Again, not just sort of trim the plant, but we need to go in there and like weed that garden. Because in many ways, again, the sort of remnants of Scorpio energy, which can hang on. Because here's what can happen with Scorpio. We can get into this idea of, yes, I survived that emotional stress and I got stronger, and now I'm rooted in that fight. Now I'm rooted in that struggle. Now I'm ready to fight and struggle, and I'm courage. I have a lot of emotional courage now. I'm intense. I'm strong. I can fight. Blah, blah, blah. This is where the nature of Scorpio gets very grounded in that energy. And if we want to move beyond being rooted and grounded in the struggle and the fight that we're always ready to have, we need to first pull out the negativity by the roots and replace it with something hopeful. Right? So we can build upon the strength of Scorpio, which is to have the courage to confront and transform our toxic emotions into something devotional. But then we need to pull that other stuff out by the roots and say, and yeah, all of that negative attachment to the fight and the struggle, I can let go of that and plant new seeds of optimism, new seeds of teaching and wisdom. That's what Sagittarius is. So again, we always have to be careful not to be attached to especially any kind of fight or struggle. This is one of the issues with Mars, who is the ruler of Scorpio, is we just love all of our struggles and fights. Don't we love telling our war stories? Admit it, you love it. I do, I admit it. I love telling my war stories. Not necessarily the ones where I got into a fight with another person anymore, because it feels ugly really quickly. But even telling my war stories about like when I play tennis and when I win, it's like, oh yeah, it was a real struggle. It was a battle, but I won. In fact, even if I lose, just the fact that I was in there fighting feels so good, right? So the ego loves to relive its glories, its war stories about how, yeah, this person came after me, but I fought back and I'm a tough Scorpio energy and don't mess with me. Right. Okay. Yeah. So we can get stuck in all of that and just kind of want to turn it into some big Hollywood production of how devoted we are or this or that. We need to pull out that negative quality by the roots and really plant that inspiring story. By the way, every sign does this. So if you're Scorpio or whatever, every sign has a way of hanging on to their story, right? Sagittarius is everything is so inspiring and so this and that. We need to, and Capricorn comes to kind of smash that lofty, idea, this lofty illusion that oh yeah, because I'm so inspired, I've actually done something. No, you got to practice it. You got to put it into practice. So Capricorn comes next to kind of smash the Sagittarius lesson a little bit. So it happens with every sign, not just Scorpio. But with Scorpio, there's this big one here, and it is a big one because it's also what's called the Gandanta point, where you have these two nakshatras, the end of Scorpio and the beginning of Sagittarius. You have these two nakshatras, Jyeshta and Mula, and what's called Gandanta, which is where the two where the sidereal based nakshatras and the zodiac signs converge. Like, for example, we have another one here between Aslesha and Magha, where the nakshatra stops and the zodiac sign stops. Because usually in the other zodiac signs, for example, between Libra and Scorpio, there's a nakshatra in between called Vishaka. Between Virgo and Libra, there's a nakshatra called Chitra. So most of the zodiac signs have a nakshatra that bridges the two signs. But between Scorpio and Sagittarius, there isn't. The end of Scorpio is where Jyeshta nakshatra ends, and the beginning of Scorpio is where Mula nakshatra begins. So it's a very kind of wrenching, transformative, and even potentially destructive area of the zodiac, particularly once you get over to the Mula side, because Mula, again, it's uprooting. Think of if you're that weed or that plant that's getting uprooted. So you're not just sort of trimming the rose bush, or you're actually pulling out the thing and you're killing it. So it's like uprooting and pulling out by the roots all of that darkness and planting something new. So the best metaphor, I think, is uprooting, literally, like if you want to plant a garden, right? You could look at your life as a garden, and you're growing. Your garden consists of the seeds that you've planted. And are the seeds a lot of difficult thorn bushes and flowers that aren't bloomed, or is it a beautiful garden where people come and visit? And what is the garden or that you've planted? Well, it's based on the seeds that you planted and then how much you nurture and water them. And this is very much symbolic of Sagittarius, because first we pull out by the roots in Mula, then we plant those seeds, then we water those seeds in the next nakshatra, then we really work hard and concentrate to grow those things in Capricorn, and it sort of continues. So this is a real metaphor for really a new cycle, a new beginning, planting a whole new life. And so this new moon, especially happening right after the solstice, which is also a new beginning because it's right after the darkest day. So after that solstice, darkest day, then we have this new moon, which is also the beginning of a new cycle. It's very much even what the ancients would have called the beginning of the new year, because in the Vedas, they considered the new year to begin on the new moon after the solstice. It's right in the Rig Veda and Yajur Veda. When sun and moon come together after the solstice, the winter solstice, that's when you begin the year. That's what begins the year, and then that month, that calendar month. So you could even consider this new moon that's happening right now, December 22nd, to really be, especially according to the ancient Indians, the beginning of the new year. By the way, this is why we're still sort of approximating it now. The new year literally is, quote, January 2nd, a Gregorian calendar date that has no resemblance to anything cosmic. So we're still sort of approximating the new year as coming right after the solstice. Just like Christmas comes right after the solstice. It used to be a solstice celebration in Europe called Saturnalia. It's a solstice celebration, and it's literally the birth of the sun. Even in Christian mythology, the sun, instead of being the sun in the sky, it's the Son of God, who is Jesus. and it's even placed on a cross. And the cross is here's a cross right here. Look at this cross. I just showed you the cross. The cross is the 4 directions of the sun going around, or the earth going around the sun. This is a cross. The sun is at the middle. So the 2 biggest Christian holidays, Christmas and Easter, are both based on movements of the sun, on the solstice and the vernal equinox. And Jesus is put on the cross. The cross. The metaphors are not hard to find. And by the way, of course, this is hemisphere specific, because in the southern hemisphere right now, you see they're getting a lot of sun. So it's winter solstice in the northern hemisphere because the northern hemisphere is tilted away from the sun. But those of you living below the equator, South Africa, South America, Australia, congratulations and happy summer solstice to you. Happy summer solstice. You're getting a lot of sun there. And then when we have our summer solstice and the northern hemisphere is pointed toward the sun, you see the southern hemisphere is pointed away from the sun. So again, you can see this cross that's measured by the calendar. But astrology isn't a calendar. It's finding and locating planets in the sky. So they're different circles. And again, if you want to know more about this, you should get this new bonus class, this free bonus class that I'm adding to the course on karma, the moon, and consciousness that'll be taught in January 7th and 8th. On January 7th and 8th, I'm teaching a class on karma, the moon, and consciousness in Vedic astrology. In this class, you're going to learn about your heart and mind and the heart and mind of others too, how your karma and actions come through the mind, seeing beyond the illusion of your mind and emotions to the meta you, that transcendent place of stillness and peace. I'm going to be teaching that with Elise de Villiers. It's a great way to learn. It's a very enjoyable format, a lively conversation. Elevate emotion into devotion. We'll analyze the moon yogas. We'll look at sati sati, moon nakshatras, lunar cycles, and a whole lot more. Again, it's going to be taught live Saturday and Sunday, January 7th and 8th, 2023. But if you can't make it live, you still get the recordings to listen to forever. In fact, you don't even have to wait to start learning. There's a great bonus class available now called Classical Moon Yogas Course. This is more than 6 hours of classes that I taught several years ago. The people who came to that course paid $125. You get this as a bonus. And it's where I analyze the moon yogas concept, the planets before the moon, join the moon, and after the moon. This is right from the classical text, Brihat Parashara Hora Sastra. You get that now. That bonus itself is worth the price of the course. The course itself is only $47, which is an incredibly reduced price from what would be $97, not including the bonus class that you get right now. So the 3 biggest psychological factors to analyze are the moon yogas, the sign and house parameters, and the nakshatra factors. But these are the static ones that are fixed at birth. We also have to look at the dashas, the transits. Would it be worth $47 to learn all of that? If so, just click here and register for the Moon Yogas course. You'll get right away, and then get the live class January 7th and 8th and have the recordings for the rest of your life to listen to. And you also get this new bonus, like I just mentioned. So again, this is where I take you through the whole Indian calendar so that you can understand things like I'm talking about today. Look, and the reason this stuff is important is because whether you know it or not, your life is being lived in accordance with these cycles. It's happening all the time. You are subject to new moons and full moons. You're going through these cycles, and they relate to you whether you know that's what's happening or not. And so you should understand them. And again, that's just a bonus class where I show you all of the lunar phases, the zodiac, the Indian holidays, how they're connected to these things, and especially as people that are interested in astrology, you should really understand the difference between the calendar and the seasons and the sky, because they are different things. It doesn't mean you can't use a zodiac that's based on the calendar like they do in Western astrology. You can do it, but it's not the sky directly. And it's and in Indian astrology, we use the sky directly because the substratum of the sky are the nakshatras. which are the sidereal portions. And then the signs are laid on top of that to measure out the 12 cycles. So again, we have these 12 cycles every year, 12 new moons every year, and we measured them with the sky. In fact, that's the way they did all the way back in the Vedas. And in fact, you should understand that the soli lunar cycles, the soli lunar months, are named after the likely nakshatra of the full moon. That's why, for example, the month of Falguna happens in the summer, because it's likely that the full moon is in Purva Falguni or Uttar Falguni, which is in Sagittarius. So again, I'm sorry, not Falguna, Ashad, excuse me. So anyway, this is the life in the world and the matrix into which you have incarnated. There's so much talk now about the matrix, seeing beyond the matrix, especially all the people that have bought into so many of the ungrounded teachings that we've seen over the last few years. People will believe in all these reptilians and all this other kind of stuff. They believe all of that, but they don't believe the actual matrix that they can learn about. You are in the matrix, if you want to call it that. It's called the cosmos. And yes, you are in it and you are it. So it's a great time to really learn those things and understand them. And so right now, with this new moon and the solstice and being on the cusp of the new year, there's so many important cycles ahead. And, I wanted to talk about this today and sort of bring it together, because again, as I said, we're on the verge of big shifts that are happening with, we have a Mercury retrograde cycle that's just starting, and it'll start at the end. By this time I think it's the 30th, and then it goes until the middle of January. Again, then Saturn changes signs in the middle of January, moves into Aquarius, big shift ahead. Then big changes in early next year, or I should say by April next year, around, in the spring, with all the eclipses and then Jupiter changing signs, and throughout the year. So again, if you wanted to get that personal forecast for yourself and also, listen to the free 2023 forecast, you could do that as well. But we're really very much on the cusp of a lot of shifts right now, and I'm sure you can feel it. So many things are shifting, and they're shifting toward something more hopeful and more optimistic. This movement of Saturn into Aquarius is really going to be positive. And we can already see a lot of the positive inclinations and iterations showing up as we leave behind a lot of the triggering and stress and pressure of the last several years. But right now, and for your holiday season and for what's coming, we're starting this new hopeful Sagittarius cycle. The Scorpio cycle was pretty intense with Mars retrograde and all this. It always is. But Sagittarian times are inspiring. It's very important to connect with good teachings now, to find those things that are inspiring and that are good teachings, not just believing in anything. And you'll notice this difference now. And part of the uprooting that needs to be happening now in Mula is uprooting of all of these bad teachings that we're just inundated with now. Look at the people that let's say that you follow online, or the people who inspire you. Are they really worth it? I mean, again, I don't mean to be cynical or mean or anything like that. And I think maybe it's just because, I've been meditating and following pure teachings for decades. So the difference between someone like Gurudev or Amma, or even just great Indian thinkers or scholars, they don't have to be Indian, but just scholars, the difference between someone like that, who is worthy and who is truly uplifting, and these other influencers and people that get quoted, and that, oh yeah, this person, you see pasted on people's social media, these these are just people that are, sharing the bling and like some kind of cynical, snarky comment about some sort of political angle or what's really going on and all of these teachings. This is the stuff that is just, in my opinion, dragging everything down, just dragging the vibration down. so far. Right now, the Sagittarian principle and the Jupiter principle is pure teachings that are transcendent and universal and that have been around forever, that are also a little bit challenging because they're not just things that we can believe by some, good looking guy or woman or politician or something that's an easy kind of snack, sort of endorphin hit that doesn't require us to do anything. It just gives us something to then post or to then, align ourselves with, but something real that, in fact, you have to, do some meditation. You have to actually be challenged and be willing to have your paradigm challenged, which means your past conditionings and your biases, and be willing to have them shattered and uprooted. I'm talking about uprooting your deeply embedded patterns and habits that lead to the people you're following. Who is it that's inspiring you? Some politician? I don't care who they are. Okay, they're public servants to do a job. Other than that, there's just no reason to attach any sense of, oh, this is going to save the world or do this thing or do that thing. Look, we all have a public civic understanding and civic duty and whatnot, but the things that connect us to something transcendent are going to be found in something transcendent. So trying to project something transcendent onto some influencer on the right or the left or whatever is just a waste of your energy. Okay? Look at them as people that do jobs and that are part of the secular life and part of these things, but then your transformation is only going to come from your spiritual practices. And those spiritual practices have been around forever. They're not easy to do just because they shift your consciousness, and people don't want their consciousness shifted. They want the result, but they don't want to do the work. You can't do the work, or you don't get the result without the work. Now, we understand this when it comes to lifting weights or doing other kinds, something physical. It's the same thing as spiritual. Thinking that you're going to have a real spiritual breakthrough by not really doing anything except listening to some influencer, thinking that's going to really bring meaningful change, is lazy. It's like watching someone lifting weights and working out and thinking it's making you stronger. Watching someone do it and talk about working out isn't changing you at all. It might be giving you the illusion that you're getting stronger, but you're not. Listening to people get up and say their thing, including me, thinking, oh, I listened to Sam, he said all this stuff, I'm really growing. You're not. Maybe you're growing into thinking, yeah, you know what, he was right. I need to do more meditation. I need to do something different. And do these practices and actually learn and actually study, because many times the point in between is some kind of study, like the course that I mentioned, or one of the things that I mentioned, where you can see this cosmic connection really working and not just being some abstraction that you connect with on the internet or something like that. By the way, I'm happy to be fulfilling my part in it. And I'm one of those people too that's in your life. And what I'm saying as one of these people that are in your life that you do listen to is there's only so much benefit that you're going to get from any of it. And right now in this Sagittarius time, we need to pull out by the roots our embedded habits that lead us to the same conclusions and replace them with a more pure version of what is true and real. And that includes myself too. I'm not saying you need to do it and I don't. I need to do it too. And I'm going through it because we all accumulate weeds. Even when we have a beautiful garden, we got to get out there and pull out the weeds. And I've been doing spiritual practices, meditating and all that for decades and decades. And my garden gets weeded. I got to get out there and weed the garden too. I went through the Scorpio cycle too. And it's like emotions piling up and toxic emotions and patterns and habits. And it's like, as that finishes and it can get quite stressful, then we need to get out there and pull out by the weeds the negative tendencies and allow that sweet fruit to grow. So I hope that metaphor is helpful to you, and avail yourself of anything that I mentioned, the teachings or the or, the forecast. This one here is free. This 2023 forecast, 2023 VedicAstrology.com. This one you can get my version of these 11 shifts for your sign so that you can see how all these will affect you. And besides that, I hope you have a great day, and we'll see you soon. Please like, share, and subscribe, and ring the bell on YouTube to get notified of new videos and live streams. Also, leave a comment, share it with others on Facebook, Twitter, or other social media platforms.